There's a sound I'll never forget. It's not the first cry of my son, though that's etched in my soul forever. It's not the whisper of I do on my wedding day. It's the soft plastic on Formica tap of a debit card being slid across the kitchen table towards me. It was a Tuesday. I remember because the trash cans were out on the curb, and I was already thinking about hauling them back up the driveway. My son, Leo, was sitting opposite me, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I'd made him, his phone buzzing incessantly on the table between us. He'd become a man who was always needed somewhere else. At 28, he had a life I sometimes felt I was just peeking into through a slightly dusty window. He had that look on his face, the one he gets when he's about to ask for something but wants to frame it as a favor he's doing for you. "Mom," he said, his voice too casual, too light, "I need you to do something for me." I just nodded, wiping my hands on a dish towel, already mentally running through the list of what it could be: pick up a package, water his plants, feed the fish he'd bought on a whim and now barely remembered he had. But then he slid it. This plain blue and white card, his grandmother's debit card, my mother's. "Take Mom's card," he said, as if he were handing me a spare key. "There's $230,000 on it. We need to transfer it to my account for the down payment on the new house. Sarah and we finally found the one, and this just makes it all possible." The world didn't stop. The refrigerator kept humming. A dog kept barking somewhere down the street. But inside me, everything went very, very still. $230,000? He said the number with such ease, such familiarity, as if he'd been counting it in his head for years. And maybe he had. He picked up his phone, finally silencing a call, his eyes still on me, expectant. "It'll only take a minute with the banking app. I'll walk you through it." He didn't see the way my breath caught in my throat. He didn't see the tremor in my hand as I reached out, not for the card, but to steady myself against the table. He saw a transaction, a necessary step towards his future, towards the beautiful, sun-drenched colonial with the big backyard for the grandchildren he promised me were coming soon. But I saw a lifetime. I saw every single one of those dollars, and I knew, with a certainty that felt like a physical weight on my chest, that he had no idea what that money really was. It wasn't a nest egg. It wasn't an inheritance. It was a secret, a quiet, desperate, and painfully built monument to a choice I made 30 years ago. A choice that started with a positive pregnancy test, a frantic heartbeat under a doctor's cold stethoscope, and a man, my husband, David, saying words that changed the entire trajectory of my life. He'd said, "We're not ready, Alina. My career, it's just not the time." And I had looked at him, at the fear in his eyes, and I had loved him so much. I loved the way his hair fell across his forehead, the way he could make me laugh until I cried. I loved our little apartment with the leaky faucet and our dreams that were so big they barely fit inside it. So I listened. I made the appointment. I sat in a room with other women, all of us staring at walls, none of us looking at each other. And I walked right back out. I stood on the sidewalk, the city roaring around me, and I knew I couldn't do it. I called my mother from a payphone, my voice shaking so badly she could barely understand me. All she said was, "Come home, baby." David was furious. He called it a betrayal. He said I was trapping him, that I was throwing away our future for a clump of cells. We had screaming fights that ended in tearful, desperate truces. He stayed. He did. He went to the doctor's appointments. He held my hand through 20 hours of labor, and he cried when he held Leo for the first time. He was a good father, in his way. He provided. He showed up for the big games, the school plays, but there was always a distance, a resentment that lived in the quiet spaces between us, a frost on the window pane of our marriage that never quite melted. And that's where the money started, not as a grand plan, but as a quiet, terrified whisper in my heart. What if he leaves? What if I'm alone with this baby? What if I can't do it? So I started skimming. A little from the grocery budget by buying generic, a little from the entertainment fund by suggesting a cheap movie rental instead of a night out. I'd stash $10, $20, $50 whenever I could into a separate account my mother helped me open, an account David knew nothing about. It was my secret rebellion, my silent insurance policy. Every dollar in that account felt like a brick I was laying for a foundation only I knew I might need. And as the years went on, as David's career took off and his bonuses got bigger, the skimming got easier. He'd hand me cash for a new sofa, and I'd find a cheaper one and keep the difference. He'd give me money for a weekend getaway, and I'd book a less expensive hotel. He never noticed. He was too busy climbing his ladder, too busy being successful. The money in that account became my shadow life. It was the weight of my fear and the measure of my independence all rolled into one. And now, my son, the very reason that account existed, was sitting in my kitchen, handing me the key to it and asking me to empty it for his dream house. He thought it was his grandmother's generosity. He thought it was a gift. He had no idea he was asking me to hand over 30 years of my silent, secret struggle. He was asking me to cash in my fear to fund his future. And looking at his hopeful, oblivious face, I knew I had to tell him. I had to break the silence of 3 decades. But how do you even begin a story like that? I took a slow, deep breath, the kind you take when you're trying to steady a ship in a storm. My fingers, which had been hovering near that cold, hard piece of plastic, finally retreated back into my lap, curling into fists so tight my nails bit into my palms. The pain was a grounding, familiar sensation. Leo's smile was starting to falter, replaced by a flicker of impatience. He glanced at his phone again, its dark screen a silent reprimand for his inattention. "Leo," I said, and my voice sounded strange, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "We need to talk about this money." "Is there a problem?" he asked, his tone shifting from casual to slightly defensive. "Mom, I know it's a lot, but Grandma was clear. She wanted me to have this for my future. She told me last year before she got really sick. She said, 'Leah, that money is for your foundation.' I thought she meant for a house. It makes sense, right?" Oh, Mom. My heart ached for her, for the secrets she had kept for me. She had been my sole confidant, the only person on earth who knew where that money had really come from, and the quiet, desperate hope it represented. She had held that card in her own frail hands for me, a willing accomplice in my long, silent vigil. To him, she was just a generous grandmother. To me, she was my anchor. "She wasn't wrong," I said, carefully, choosing each word as if I were walking across a floor covered in shattered glass. "It is for a foundation, but not the kind you're thinking of." He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. I could see his father in that gesture, the same stubborn set of the jaw, the same wall going up when he felt he was being challenged. "Then what kind, Mom? What's the issue? Is it taxes? Because I've already talked to my accountant. We can—" "It's not about taxes, honey," I interrupted him, my own voice gaining a sliver of strength. This was it. There was no elegant way to say it. This money, it wasn't your grandmother's. Not really. It was always mine. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound than any we'd had before. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to grow louder, a judgmental drone in the background. "Yours?" he finally said, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "How? Dad handled all the finances. You never— I mean, He trailed off, but the unspoken words hung in the air between us. You never worked. You never had an income. You were just Mom. And there it was, the core of it all. The identity I had worn for 30 decades, the comfortable, soft-focused portrait of a mother and wife, was about to be ripped away to reveal the stark, complicated sketch underneath. I know what you think, I said, my voice softening. And you're not entirely wrong, but there's a part of my life, of our family's life, that you never knew. A part I kept hidden. I looked down at my hands, at the wedding band I still wore even though David had been gone for 5 years. It felt heavy on my finger, a symbol of so many promises, both kept and broken. When I was pregnant with you, I began, the words feeling foreign and dangerous on my tongue. Your father and I, we weren't in the same place. He was terrified. He had this whole plan for his career, for our life, and a baby, well, a baby wasn't in the 5-year plan. I tried to smile, to soften the blow, but it felt more like a grimace. He asked me not to have you. Leo's face went perfectly still. The impatience vanished, replaced by a blank, unsettling neutrality. What? He asked me to terminate the pregnancy. I said it clearly, forcing myself to meet his eyes. I saw the shock register, a quick flinch, as if I'd physically struck him. And for a few awful, terrible days, I considered it. I loved your father so much, Leo. I wanted his dreams to come true. I wanted to be the partner he needed. So I made an appointment. I went to the clinic. I could feel the ghost of that waiting room, the smell of antiseptic and anxiety, the way my hands had trembled as I filled out the forms. I was sitting there, and all I could think about was you, this tiny, unknown person. And I got up and I walked out. I called my grandmother, and she came and got me. She held me while I cried on the curb. She was the one who told me I was brave, that I was making the right choice, even if it was the harder one. Leo was just staring at me, his coffee forgotten, his phone completely ignored. The world outside, with its buzzing demands, had ceased to exist. Your father stayed. I continued, the story now a river I couldn't dam. He was angry and he was scared, but he stayed. He was there when you were born. He loved you, Leo. In his own way, he really did. But something in our marriage, it cracked that day. I had chosen you over him, and he never, ever forgot it. There was always this distance, this resentment. He provided for us. He was a good provider. But emotionally, he built a wall, and I lived on the other side of it with you. I finally reached out and touched the debit card, not to pick it up, but just to feel its cold reality. And I was so scared all the time. What if he left? What if something happened to him? How would I take care of you? I had no career, no savings of my own. I felt so powerless. So I started this. I tapped the card lightly. A little at a time, a few dollars from the grocery money, a bit left over from the household budget. Your father never noticed. He was too busy being successful to notice the small change. And your grandmother, she helped me. She let me use her name to open the account. She was the only one who knew. This money, Leo, this $230,000, it's not a gift. It's my fear. It's every silent tear I cried, wondering if I was enough. It's every night I lay awake wondering if the life I'd built for us was about to crumble. It's the price of the choice I made to have you. The silence in the kitchen was no longer just empty space. It was a physical presence, thick and heavy, pressing down on both of us. Leo hadn't moved a muscle. He was just staring at me, his eyes wide, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions, shock, disbelief, and a dawning, horrifying understanding. I watched as the simple narrative he'd carried in his head, the story of his parents' marriage, of his own beginning, shattered and began to reassemble into something far more complex and painful. He wanted you to... He couldn't even finish the sentence. His voice was a rasp, stripped of all its earlier confidence. All this time, I thought you two were happy. I mean, you argued sometimes, sure, but everyone's parents do. I never saw that. He looked down at his hands, as if seeing them for the first time, the hands of a man whose very existence had been a point of contention. We were happy in moments, I said softly, wanting to give him that, at least, a few islands of truth in the turbulent sea. There was so much joy, Leo. Your first steps, your first day of school, teaching you to ride a bike. Your father was there for all of that. He cheered the loudest at your graduations. He was so proud of the man you became. That part was real, but underneath it all, for me, there was always this current of anxiety, this knowledge that my security, our security, was fragile, that it depended on the goodwill of a man who, deep down, had resented the very fact of you from the beginning. I saw him flinch at the word resented, and my heart broke a little more. This was the poison I had kept bottled for so long, and now I was pouring it out from my son to drink. But he had to understand. He had to know what this money truly represented. This account, it became my secret life. It was my what-if fund. What if he walked out? What if he lost his job? What if I needed to get us out of a bad situation? Every dollar I added felt like a piece of my soul I was reclaiming. It was wrong, I know that. It was a deception. But at the time, it felt like the only power I had. It was the money that meant I could always, always take care of you, no matter what. When your father passed away and his will was read, and I saw that he had taken care of me, that he had provided, a part of me felt guilty. This money felt like a betrayal of his final act. But another part of me, the scared young mother I used to be, felt vindicated. She had been right to be afraid. She had been right to prepare. Leo finally moved. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping against the floor with a sound that made me jump. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the empty driveway, his back to me. His shoulders were tense. I could see the muscles in his neck corded tight.
All those times, he said, his voice low and strained, directed at the window pane. All those times Dad would buy a new car or we'd go on a fancy vacation, and you'd say you were happy, that you loved it. Was that a lie too? Was our whole life just a performance? No! The word burst out of me, sharper than I intended. No, Leo, it wasn't a performance. My love for you was never, ever a performance. That was the one completely real thing in my life. Everything I did, every compromise I made, every silent tear I shed into that account, it was for you. It was all for you. The vacations were real because I saw the joy on your face. The house was real because it was your home. The love was real. My God, the love was the most real thing of all. I was pleading with him now, my voice cracking. The money wasn't about hating your father or deceiving him. It was about loving you so much that the thought of failing you, of not being able to protect you, was unbearable. He turned around slowly. His eyes were glistening. But you didn't fail me, Mom. You were always there. You were the most constant thing in my life. Why would you keep this from me? Why tell me now like this? He gestured vaguely at the card on the table. Why let me think for 1 second that this money was just a gift from Grandma for a house? Because you handed it to me, I said, my own tears starting to fall now, hot and unchecked. You handed me this card, this symbol of my entire life's fear and struggle, and you asked me to just transfer it, like it was nothing, like it was just a number on a screen.
You didn't know its weight. You couldn't. And in that moment, I realized I had protected you from the truth for so long that I had created a different kind of lie. I had let you believe in a simpler, easier story. And you deserved to know the real one. You deserved to know that the foundation your grandmother talked about wasn't for a house with a picket fence. It was the foundation I built for us with my own two hands, in secret, out of fear and a love so fierce it sometimes terrified me. He stood there by the window, the morning light catching the tears he was stubbornly trying to hold back. A man, my little boy, caught between the father he thought he knew and the mother he was only just beginning to truly see. The air was thick with all the unspoken years, the ghost of my husband, his father, a palpable presence in the room. I could almost see David leaning against the counter, his arms crossed, a faint, weary disapproval on his face. He'd always hated emotional scenes. He never said anything, Leo whispered, his voice ragged. Not a word, not a hint. All those times we went fishing, just the two of us, he'd talk about work, about baseball, about my grades, but never that. Never. He shook his head, as if trying to dislodge a memory that wouldn't fit. I looked up to him so much. I built my life trying to be the kind of man he was, driven, successful, a good provider. That's what this house is about, Mom. It's about being that for Sarah. It's about building a stable, secure life, the kind he built for us. He let out a short, bitter laugh, or the kind I thought he built for us. My heart ached for him. He was trying to reconcile two opposing truths, and the cognitive dissonance was physically painful to watch. He did build that life for us, Leo, I said, wanting to be fair, even now. In all the ways that the world can see and measure, he provided a wonderful life for you. He gave you opportunities I never could have on my own. That part is true. Your admiration for him isn't misplaced. But a marriage, a family, it's more than a balance sheet. There are emotional debts and credits that never get recorded. There are wounds that never fully heal. They just scar over. What I did, this secret, it was my way of tending to my own wound. He finally walked back to the table, but he didn't sit down. He stood over his chair, his knuckles white where he gripped the wooden back. So what does this mean, Mom? What does this mean for this money, for the house? He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not my son, but a man facing the collapse of a dream. Sarah and we've already put in an offer. It's contingent on this down payment. The inspection is tomorrow.
The practicalities. They always come crashing in, don't they? No matter how profound the emotional earthquake, life demands that you still deal with the broken pipes and the leaking roof. His question hung in the air, and I realized I didn't have an answer. For 30 years, this money had been a theoretical safety net, a monument to my past struggle. I had never once thought about what I would actually do with it. The having of it was the point. The power it represented was its purpose. I don't know, I admitted, my shoulders slumping. The confession had drained me of all my strength. I truly don't know, Leo. Telling you, that was all I could think of. I just knew I couldn't let you spend it without knowing where it came from, without knowing that every dollar in that account is tied to a memory, the memory of the first time I heard your heartbeat, a sound so fast and strong it drowned out all my fear. The memory of the first time your father held you, and the look on his face was so full of wonder that I let myself believe, for just a moment, that everything would be okay. The memory of 1,000 silent compromises, 1,000 small acts of survival. This money isn't clean, Leo. It's complicated. It's stained with tears and sealed with silence.
I looked up at him, my vision blurry. I wanted your life to be simpler than mine. I wanted your marriage to be built on nothing but love and open hands, not on secret accounts and quiet resentments. And by giving you this money, this tainted money, I felt like I would be passing my burden onto you and Sarah. I would be laying my shaky foundation underneath your dream house. I took a shuddering breath. And I love you too much to do that. He was silent for a long time, just looking at me. The anger and confusion in his eyes were slowly being replaced by something else, something deeper and more thoughtful. He was really seeing me, perhaps for the first time, not just as his mother, but as a woman, a person with her own history, her own pain, her own story that existed long before he came into it. All this time, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, you thought I was the lucky one. You had Dad, who took care of everything. You had this comfortable life. I never once imagined you felt powerless. He let go of the chair and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father, it made my breath catch. I'm so sorry, Mom. Those 4 words. They weren't about the money. They weren't about the house. They were an acknowledgement of my struggle, a validation of my silent years. It was an absolution I didn't know I needed. A fresh wave of tears came, but they were different this time. They were a release. You have nothing to be sorry for, I whispered. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. You are the reason for everything. He came around the table then, and he knelt down beside my chair, just like he used to when he was a little boy wanting to tell me a secret. He put his arms around me, and I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of my son, a scent that had always meant home. We stayed like that for a long time, in the quiet kitchen, with the forgotten debit card sitting between us on the table, its meaning slowly and irrevocably changing. He held me until my shaking subsided, until the storm of tears had passed, and all that was left was a hollowed-out, raw kind of calm. When he pulled back, his own eyes were red-rimmed, but his gaze was clear, focused. He didn't return to his seat. He stayed kneeling beside me, his hand resting on my arm, an anchor in the turbulent sea of our shared history. You can't keep it, he said softly. The words weren't an accusation or a demand. They were a statement, simple and profound. I looked at him, confused. Keep what? The burden, he said. This weight you've been carrying. This money. You can't keep it locked away in a secret account anymore, Mom. It's poisoned you for long enough. I started to protest, to tell him that it wasn't poison. It was my safety, my hard-won independence. But the words died in my throat, because he was right. The fear that had fueled its creation had long since faded, but the habit of secrecy, the weight of the lie, had become its own kind of prison. I had carried it for so long, I no longer knew how to stand up without it. What are you saying? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I'm saying I don't want the money, he said, his voice firm now, filled with a conviction that startled me. I can't build a home for my future family on a foundation of your fear. I won't. He glanced at the card, and for the first time, I saw not desire, but a kind of reverence for its painful history. This money, it was your survival. I get that now. And I am so sorry you ever felt you had to do that. But you survived, Mom. You thrived. You raised me. You got through a marriage that was complicated. You are here. You are strong. You don't need this safety net anymore. He looked at me, his eyes earnest, pleading. Let's transform it. Let's take this monument to your fear and turn it into a monument to your freedom. I was stunned into silence. This was not the reaction I had expected. I had braced for anger, for hurt, for a permanent rift. I had never imagined this alchemy, this offer to transmute my leaden secret into gold.
I don't know exactly, he admitted, a small, weary smile touching his lips. But we'll figure it out, together. This isn't just your secret anymore, Mom. It's ours now, and we're going to decide what to do with it. But the first thing we're going to do is take it out of Grandma's name. It's going in your name, your account, your money. No more shadows. The simplicity of it, the sheer liberating rightness of it, washed over me. For 30 years, this money had existed in a liminal space, attached to my mother's identity, a ghost in the machine of my life. To claim it, to put my own name on it, felt terrifying and exhilarating all at once. It would be an admission, a confession to the world, or at least to a bank teller, that I, Elena, had done this thing, that I had this power. And the house? I asked, my heart aching for his dream. He shrugged, a genuine, unburdened gesture. We'll figure that out too. Maybe we get a smaller house. Maybe we wait another year. Sarah will understand. He said it with such certainty, such faith in his partner, that it took my breath away. This was the simplicity I had wanted for him, a marriage built on open hands. This is more important, he said, his gaze steady on me. You are more important. In that moment, the last vestiges of the scared young mother I had been seemed to loosen their grip on my soul. The need to control, to hide, to prepare for a disaster that never came began to evaporate in the warmth of my son's compassion. He wasn't just my child, he was a good man, a better man than his father had been capable of being. And he was offering me a gift far greater than any down payment, the chance to lay down my burden. Okay, I said, the word feeling like a vow. Okay, Leo, let's do it. Together. He nodded. A slow, sure smile finally reached his eyes. Good. Then let's start right now. Do you have the login for this account? Let's look at it. Not as a secret, but as a project. Our project. I reached for my laptop, my hands trembling for a new reason now. Not from fear, but from a nervous, thrilling anticipation. The plastic card was no longer a symbol of my silent struggle. It was becoming a key. And for the first time in 30 years, I was about to use it to unlock a door instead of bolting one shut. The laptop whirred to life, its screen a bright, impersonal blue. For 30 years, this account had existed as an abstraction, a number I checked furtively in the dead of night, its balance a scorecard of my anxiety. Now, with Leo pulling his chair close beside me, its glow illuminating both our faces, it felt like we were about to dissect a living thing, a creature I had kept hidden in a dark cage. My fingers fumbled over the keyboard as I navigated to the bank's website, my pulse a frantic drumbeat in my ears. This was more exposing than any physical nakedness. It's under your grandmother's name, I murmured, the familiar shame washing over me. Evelyn Ross. Typing her name felt like a betrayal of her memory, too. She had done this for me, out of love, and now I was dragging our secret into the light. Leo didn't say anything. He just watched, his presence a steady, silent support. I entered the username, a combination of my childhood pet's name and my old home address, and then the password. My hand hovered over the enter key. This was the threshold. Once we crossed it, there was no going back to the way things were. I pressed it. The screen refreshed, and there it was. Not just a number, but a history. A long, scrolling list of transactions that told the story of my life in cryptic financial shorthand. $47.50 transfer from joint account, memo, groceries. $22.80 transfer from joint account, memo, household. $150 cash deposit.
$500, transfer from joint account, memo, furniture. He leaned in, his eyes scanning the list. He didn't just see numbers. I could see him starting to read between the lines. January 12th, 1995, $47.50, he read softly. That was the week of my 6th birthday party, wasn't it? The one with the magician. A lump formed in my throat. He remembered. I remembered. I'd saved that money by buying generic soda and store-brand chips, by making the birthday cake myself instead of ordering one from the bakery. I'd felt a pang of guilt then, depriving him of a professional cake, but the satisfaction of adding that $47.50 to the account had been a bitter consolation. March 3rd, 2001, he continued, his finger tracing the screen. $500. Furniture. He looked at me. That was when Dad bought that huge, expensive leather recliner he wanted, wasn't it? I nodded, unable to speak. I'd talked him into a slightly less expensive model and secretly squirreled away the difference. Every entry was a ghost. A $22.80 deposit was the weekend I told David I had a headache so we wouldn't go out to a movie, saving the cost of tickets and popcorn. A $150 cash deposit was the money my own mother had slipped me for my birthday, with a note that said, "For your future, darling." She'd meant this account. She'd always meant this account. We scrolled further down, through the years of his adolescence, through college tuition payments that had made me transfer larger sums from the main account, always finding a way to skim a little, a few $100s here and there, a tiny tax on our comfortable life. The entries were a diary of my quiet rebellion, a map of my loneliness. Then we reached the end. The current balance, $230,417.86. It wasn't just a number anymore. It was 1,000 moments of sacrifice, 1,000 small betrayals, 1,000 acts of love all twisted together into one incomprehensible sum. We both just stared at it. The silence in the room was different now, not heavy with unsaid things, but awed by the sheer, stark reality of what was on the screen. "It's a life, Mom," Leo finally whispered, his voice full of reverence. "It's a whole other life you were living." "It was your life," I corrected him, my voice thick. "It was always for you." He shook his head slowly, a new, profound understanding dawning in his eyes. "No, look at it. Really look at it. It started for me, I believe that, but it kept going long after I was grown, long after I was safe. You kept adding to it. Why?" His question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Why had I? When Leo graduated college and got his first job, the immediate danger was gone. David was still distant, but the sharp edge of my fear had dulled. Yet I'd kept on. The habit was too ingrained. The account had become more than a safety net. It had become a part of my identity. The secret keeper. The woman with a plan. The one who wouldn't be caught helpless again. "I don't know," I answered truthfully. It was the most terrifying admission of all. I think I forgot how to stop. Leo placed his hand over mine on the mouse. He clicked the transfer button. A new screen popped up. "Where do you want it to go? Your checking account? A new savings account in your name?" I looked at the fields on the screen. From account, ****, 4582, Evelyn Ross. To account, it was blank. A void waiting to be filled. My future, waiting to be chosen. "A new account," I said, my voice gaining strength. Just my name, Elena Marie Peters. It was my name, my own. Not David's wife, not Leo's mother, not Evelyn's daughter. Mine. Okay, Leo said, a smile finally breaking through the solemnity on his face. It was a smile of pride. Let's do it. And as I began to type my own name into the recipient field, I felt the first fragile thread of a new beginning. The cage door was swinging open. My name looked strange there, in that stark digital field. Elena Marie Peters. For so long it had felt like a supporting character in the story of my own life, but now, as I typed it letter by letter, it felt like a claim, a declaration. Leo guided me through the rest of the process, his voice calm and steady, a lighthouse in the storm of my emotions. We created a new, high-yield savings account, and with a final, deep breath that felt like the first real breath I'd taken in decades, I clicked Confirm Transfer. A spinning wheel appeared. It may take a business day or two to fully process, Leo said, his practical tone a comforting anchor. But the act was done. The money was no longer my mother's. It was no longer a secret. It was mine. The weight hadn't vanished, but it had shifted. It was no longer a burden I had to carry alone in the dark. It was a shared responsibility, a puzzle we would solve together in the light. I closed the laptop lid, the soft click sounding like a period at the end of a very long, painful sentence. We both sat back, the air in the kitchen feeling lighter, easier to breathe. The morning had bled into afternoon, the sun having moved across the floor, and the mundane reality of the day began to reassert itself. The trash cans were still on the curb, the dish towel was still crumpled on the table. I have to tell Sarah, Leo said, breaking the silence. He didn't sound anxious about it, just resolute. She needs to know. About the house and about all of this. A fresh wave of nausea rolled through me. Sarah, my sweet, bright-eyed daughter-in-law, who loved my son with an open, untarnished heart. The thought of her knowing the messy, complicated truth about our family felt like exposing something beautiful to a corrosive element. Oh, Leo, are you sure? It's a lot. It could change how she sees us, how she sees me. He reached over and took my hand. His was warm, solid. Mom, it will change how she sees you. It will change how she sees you for the better. She'll see the strength it took. She'll understand the woman you are, not just the mother-in-law you present. She's my partner, and partners don't build their future on pretty lies. They build it on ugly, complicated, beautiful truth. He squeezed my fingers. Trust me. Trust her. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But the habit of secrecy was a deep, worn groove in my soul. Letting someone new in felt dangerously vulnerable. What will you say? I asked, my voice small. The truth, he said simply. The same truth you told me. I'll start from the beginning, with the pregnancy test, and Dad, and the appointment you walked out of. I'll tell her about the skimming, and the fear, and the love. I'll tell her why we can't take the money for the house. Not like this. He stood up, stretching his back. I'm going to go home and talk to her now, before the energy of this fades, before I lose my nerve. I stood up too, feeling unsteady on my feet, as if the ground beneath me had been remade and I hadn't yet learned its new contours. Will you call me? After? I will, he promised, pulling me into a tight hug. It's going to be okay, Mom. You'll see. This is the start of everything being okay. He let go, gave me a small, reassuring smile, and walked out of the kitchen. I heard the front door open and close, and then I was alone. The silence in the house was profound. I looked around the room, at the table where the card had been slid, at the window Leo had stood at the laptop that held my confession. Everything was the same, yet everything was different. The ghosts felt quieter, as if they had been acknowledged and were now, finally, beginning to rest. I mechanically started cleaning up, washing the coffee mugs, wiping down the counters. My mind was a whirlwind, replaying every moment of the morning. The shock on Leo's face, the pain in his eyes, the way he had knelt beside me, the determined set of his jaw as he decided to transform my secret. And now, he was taking our fractured truth to his wife. I felt a terrifying, hopeful vulnerability. The fate of my relationship with my son, with my daughter-in-law, with the memory of my husband and my mother was now out of my hands. It was a story being told by someone else, and all I could do was wait. The afternoon stretched on, long and silent. I tried to read, but the words blurred. I tried to watch television, but the sounds were just noise. Every minute felt like an hour. I was waiting for the phone to ring, for a text to buzz, dreading and hoping for it in equal measure. I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and I had just handed Leo the rope, trusting him to either pull me to safety or let me fall. The waiting was its own special kind of agony, a quiet, desperate prayer sent out into the universe, hoping that the truth, however ugly, would indeed set us free.
The sun had dipped below the neighbor's roof, casting long, melancholy shadows across the living room when my phone finally buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a text from Leo. My heart hammered against my ribs as I fumbled to open it. The message was brief, just a few words. "Can we come over? Both of us." No context, no indication of how the conversation had gone. My mind immediately conjured the worst. Sarah was angry. She was disgusted. She was here to confront me, to tell me what a toxic, deceitful woman I was, to protect her husband and her future from the stain of my past. I typed a shaky, "Of course," and sent it, then rushed around, straightening cushions that were already straight, wiping down already clean surfaces, performing the useless rituals of a woman trying to impose order on the chaos within. They arrived within 20 minutes. I saw their car pull into the driveway, saw two silhouettes get out. I braced myself, standing in the middle of the living room like a defendant awaiting a verdict. The key turned in the lock, the door opened, and they stepped inside. Sarah came in first. Her eyes found mine immediately. They weren't full of anger or judgment. They were wide and red-rimmed and filled with a profound, startling empathy. She didn't say a word. She just walked straight over to me and wrapped her arms around me, pulling me into a hug so tight it stole my breath. She smelled of lavender and the faint, clean scent of her shampoo. And she held me. She held me like she was absorbing all the pain and loneliness of the last 30 years, like she was trying to press the broken pieces of me back together. "Oh, Elena, I'm so sorry. I am so, so sorry you had to carry that all by yourself." All the strength I had mustered, all the defensive walls I had built crumbled into dust in that instant. A sob broke from my chest, a raw, guttural sound I didn't recognize as my own. I clung to her, this young woman who had married into our complicated story, and I wept. I wept for the young, scared version of myself. I wept for the years of silence. I wept from the sheer overwhelming relief of being seen and being understood and being loved anyway. Over her shoulder, I saw Leo watching us, his own eyes shining. He gave me a small, watery smile and a nod, as if to say, "See, I told you." When we finally pulled apart, both of us wiping our eyes, Sarah took my hands in hers. She said, "Leo told me everything. And the first thing I want to say is that you are the bravest woman I know. The second thing I want to say is that we are not taking that money, not a single cent of it." "But your house," I started, the old guilt flaring. "Our house will happen," she said firmly, cutting me off. "But it will happen the right way, on our own terms, with our own sweat and our own savings. We don't want a foundation built on pain. We want to build our own." She looked at Leo,
and the love that passed between them was so tangible, so uncomplicated, it felt like a balm on my old, weary soul. Leo told me his idea, what he said about transforming it, and I think he's right. But I have an idea too.
She led me to the sofa, and we all sat down, the three of us. A new, unexpected council. That money, Sarah began, her voice gentle but passionate. It's the physical proof of a mother's love and a wife's survival. It's your story. So it shouldn't just go into another bank account to gather dust. It should do something. It should be something that honors that story. She leaned forward. What if it became a fund for other women? Women who feel trapped, who feel scared, who need their own what-if fund but don't have a way to start one. I stared at her, stunned. The idea was so beautiful, so generous. It left me speechless. Take my secret shame and turn it into a public source of hope for others? Leo picked up the thread, his excitement growing. We could set up a small nonprofit, a grant program. We could call it, I don't know, the Evelyn Fund, after Grandma. We could help single mothers with down payments or women leaving difficult situations with security deposits or pay for career training. It would be a hand up, the one you never had. The Evelyn Fund. I repeated the name, and it felt like a blessing. It felt like a resurrection. My mother's name, once a placeholder for my fear, would become a symbol of empowerment for other women. The money would no longer be about surviving in silence. It would be about thriving in community. It would be about breaking the cycle. Tears welled up in my eyes again, but they were different tears now. They were tears of healing, of purpose. I looked at my son and my daughter-in-law, these two beautiful, compassionate humans, and I felt a hope so fierce it was dizzying. It's perfect, I whispered, my voice cracking with emotion. It's the most perfect idea I've ever heard. In that moment, the $230,000 finally, truly ceased to be a monument to my fear. It became a seed, and the three of us were going to plant it together and watch it grow into something we couldn't yet imagine. The energy in the room shifted from one of painful revelation to something electric, something brimming with a sense of mission. The grief and the weight were still there. They were a part of the story now, but they were no longer in the driver's seat. We were, the three of us. Sarah, practical and brimming with ideas, immediately pulled out her own laptop. "We don't have to figure out all the legal stuff tonight," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "But we can start brainstorming. What would the grants look like? Who would we want to help most?" Leo, energized, started pacing. "It can't just be a handout," he said, thinking aloud. "It has to be empowering, like mom empowering herself. It could be for education, for a specific trade school certification, something that gives a woman a skill, a career, not just a temporary fix. Or childcare," I added, the word feeling foreign and powerful on my tongue. I was contributing. My experience, my long isolation, was becoming a source of insight, not shame. So many women can't work because they can't afford childcare. A grant could cover that for 6 months, a year, long enough for her to get on her feet. I thought of all the times I'd felt pinned in place by my responsibilities, and the idea of freeing another woman from that felt like unlocking a door in my own soul. We talked for hours, the evening deepening outside the windows. We ordered pizza, the cardboard boxes and paper plates a stark, mundane contrast to the profound conversations swirling around the kitchen table. We were building a dream from the ashes of my nightmare. Sarah, with her sharp, organized mind, immediately pulled out her own laptop. The Evelyn Fund. Mission: to provide financial grants and resources to women and mothers facing economic hardship or transition, empowering them to build stable, independent futures for themselves and their families.
Seeing it written down in black and white made it real. It was no longer just a wistful idea. It was a thing we were going to do. My mother's name, once a secret on a bank statement, was now the title of a promise we were making to strangers. But as the initial euphoria settled into a steady, determined glow, a more immediate, practical worry began to nag at the back of my mind. Leo and Sarah's house, their dream, so tangible just this morning, was now on hold. I watched them, their heads bent together over the laptop, pointing at the screen, and my heart swelled with love and a fierce, protective ache. They were sacrificing their immediate future for the sake of healing my past.
The house, I said, interrupting their flow. They both looked up. Your offer, the inspection, what are you going to do? Leo and Sarah exchanged a look, one of those silent, married conversations that happens in a split second. It was Sarah who spoke. We're going to withdraw our offer in the morning. No, I said, the word coming out firmer than I intended. You can't. Mom, we've talked about this, Leo started, but I held up a hand. I know you have, and I love you both more than I can possibly say for being willing to do that, for understanding, but I won't let you. This fund, it's going to take time, months, maybe a year to set up properly. That money is going to be tied up, and in the meantime, you'll lose your dream house. I won't have that on my conscience. It would just be another form of the same guilt. But we agreed, Sarah said softly. We don't want the money for the house. And I'm not giving it to you for the house, I replied, a new idea, a compromise, beginning to form in my mind. It felt right. It felt balanced. The $230,000 is for the Evelyn Fund. That money is spoken for. It has a purpose, and it's a beautiful one. But I took a deep breath. I have my own retirement savings, Leo. Money that is in my name, that your father left me, that I've added to over the years. It's mine, free and clear. And I want to give you a part of it. Not the whole down payment, but a significant chunk of it, as a loan. An interest-free, no-pressure loan from your mother. Let me help you with your dream, the right way, with clean hands and an open heart. The silence that followed was thoughtful, not heavy. Leo looked at Sarah, a question in his eyes. She bit her lip, considering it. Alone? Leo asked. Alone, I confirmed. You can pay me back when you can. In a year, in 5 years, in 10. It doesn't matter. This wouldn't be the secret, stained money. This would be me, your mother, believing in your future and wanting to be a part of it in a healthy, honest way. Let me do this. Please. It would mean the world to me. Sarah was the first to smile, a slow, genuine smile that reached her eyes. She said, an interest-free loan from my mother-in-law. I think that's an offer we can accept. She looked at Leo. What do you think? Leo looked from her to me, and the relief and love in his face was my answer. He said, I think that we have a lot of phone calls to make in the morning. And in that moment, I felt a circle complete. The fear that had started with a pregnancy test was ending with a promise to help other women. The money I had hidden from my husband was becoming a gift for my son, given freely and openly. The secrets were gone. All that was left was the truth, and the love that had been there all along, waiting for the light to find it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind, a blur of paperwork and phone calls that felt more like a sacrament than a chore. The first thing we did, the very next morning, was go to the bank together. Leo, Sarah, and I. I walked up to the teller, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a sense of profound rightness. I presented my ID, closed my mother's old account, and officially transferred the entire $230,417.86 into a new account under the working name, the Evelyn Fund. The bank manager, a kindly woman with glasses perched on her nose, had no idea she was witnessing the end of a 30-year secret and the birth of a promise. To her, it was just a large transfer. To us, it was a revolution. Simultaneously, we worked on the house. Leo and Sarah spoke with their realtor, and with a transparency that felt liberating, they explained the change in their financial situation. Using a portion of my own clean savings, we structured a new, smaller down payment. They wouldn't get the house with no mortgage as they'd initially dreamed, but with a manageable one they could handle on their own. The inspection went ahead, and it felt different this time. It wasn't a transaction fueled by a hidden painful history. It was a practical step towards a future they were building themselves, with a little help from family, the way it was always supposed to be. And through it all, the three of us became a team, welded together by our shared purpose. Evenings and weekends were spent at my kitchen table, now littered not with secrets, but with legal pads, printouts about nonprofit law, and countless cups of tea. We discovered that Sarah had a knack for crafting eloquent mission statements. Leo, with his business mind, dove into the intricacies of budgeting and grant structures. And me, I found my voice in telling the story. I started writing, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence, about the why. I wrote about the feeling of powerlessness, the quiet desperation of wanting to provide a safety net for your child, the corrosive nature of a secret. I didn't use names, but I poured my truth into every word. This narrative, we decided, would be the heart of the Evelyn Fund's website. It wouldn't be a faceless charity, it would be a story, my story, inviting other women to share in its hope. One Saturday afternoon, we were finalizing the grant application questions. We should ask, "What does a stable future look like to you?" Sarah suggested, tapping her pen on the table. It's open-ended. It lets them define their own dream. And what one barrier, if removed, would have the biggest impact on your life right now? I added. I knew that question intimately. For 30 years, my answer would have been the fear of being left with nothing. Leo looked up from his laptop, a thoughtful expression on his face. You know, we've been so focused on the mechanics, we haven't really talked about what this means for us. He looked at me. Mom, are you really okay with this? With your story being out there? It's one thing for us to know, but it's another for it to be public. I leaned back in my chair, considering his question. The fear was still there, a faint echo. The fear of judgment, of people thinking I was a terrible wife, a deceitful woman. But a stronger feeling had taken root. I'm more than okay with it, Leo, I said. And I meant it. For so long, I was ashamed. I thought my strength was something ugly, something I'd had to build in the shadows because the world wouldn't understand. But I see now that it wasn't ugly. It was necessary. It was survival. And if my story, my ugly, complicated, beautiful truth, as you called it, can make one other woman feel less alone, less ashamed of her own survival instincts, then it will have been worth it. My silence didn't protect me. It isolated me. I don't want to be isolated anymore. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're the bravest person I know. She repeated her words from that first night, and this time I almost believed her. A month later, the keys to the new house were in their hands. It was a bright, crisp day, full of promise. We stood on the front porch, the three of us, before the movers arrived. Leo unlocked the door and pushed it open to the empty, sun-filled living room. The smell of fresh paint and new beginnings filled the air. "Welcome home," I said, my voice choked with emotion. Leo turned to me, his eyes serious. "You helped build this, Mom. Not just with the loan, with everything. This house, it's built on truth now. That's the strongest foundation there is." He and Sarah stepped inside, but I lingered on the porch for a moment, looking back at the quiet street. I thought of the young woman I had been, trembling outside a clinic, choosing her child. I thought of the wife I had been, quietly building a fortress of fear. And I thought of the woman I was now, standing in the sunlight, her secret transformed into a source of strength, not just for herself, but for her family, and with hope, for others. The past wasn't gone, and the scars would always be there, but they were no longer wounds. They were a map that showed how far I'd come. I took a deep breath of the clean, new air, and then I stepped across the threshold after my children, ready to help them fill this honest house with love. The movers came and went, a chaotic ballet of heavy footsteps and cardboard boxes. I stayed to help, not because they needed it, but because I wanted to soak in every moment of this new beginning. I unwrapped glasses and stacked them in Sarah's pristine new kitchen cabinets. I helped Leo arrange the furniture in the living room, the same sofa where we'd had our life-altering conversation, now finding its place in a home built on honesty. With every box unpacked, every picture hung on a fresh nail, it felt like we were laying a new ghost to rest. David's ghost, the ghost of my fear. They weren't forgotten, but their power was diminished, their presence now a quiet footnote in a much louder, more joyful story. That night, exhausted but exhilarated, we ordered Chinese food and sat on the floor of the empty living room, surrounded by towers of boxes, eating from cartons with plastic forks. The single bulb of the overhead light fixture cast a warm, hopeful glow. We were too tired for grand speeches, but the comfortable silence between us was its own kind of eloquence. This was a different kind of wealth, one no secret account could ever hold. In the weeks and months that followed, our lives found a new, beautiful rhythm. Leo and Sarah settled into their new home, their marriage seeming to grow stronger and more resilient, as if the trial of our truth had tempered it like steel. And the Evelyn Fund began to take shape, slowly, painstakingly, becoming more than just a concept in a Google document. We found a pro bono lawyer through a friend of a friend, a sharp, compassionate woman named Brenda, who believed in our mission and guided us through the labyrinth of forming a 501c3. We opened a dedicated bank account, and I transferred the first $50,000 into it as seed money. Seeing that transaction, a transfer from the Evelyn Fund to the Evelyn Fund operating account, was surreal. The money was no longer mine. It was ours. It belonged to the mission. My days, which for so long had been quiet and sometimes lonely, were now filled with purpose. I became the de facto heart of the operation, the storyteller. I spent my mornings at the local library researching other micro-grant organizations and my afternoons working with Sarah to build our website. We decided to launch with a simple, powerful video. I was terrified. Speaking my truth to my son was one thing, broadcasting it to the world was another. But the day we filmed, sitting in my now familiar living room with a young filmmaker Sarah knew, the words came easily. I didn't read from a script, I just looked into the camera and told my story. The young woman, the appointment, the fear, the secret savings, the kitchen table confession, and the transformation. I cried, but I also laughed, a real, genuine laugh, when I talked about the joy of building this new future with my family. When we watched the raw footage back, even the filmmaker was quiet for a moment before saying, "That's it. That's the whole thing right there." 6 months to the day after Leo slid that blue and white card across my table, we launched the Evelyn Fund website. We sent the link to a few close friends and family, posted it on our personal social media pages, and held our breath. The response was quiet at first, a few likes, a few shares, but then something magical happened. An old college friend of mine, someone I hadn't spoken to in 20 years, sent me a private message. "Elena," she wrote, "I saw your video. I cried through the whole thing. I had a Evelyn Fund of my own, only mine was cash in a cookie tin in the back of my closet. Thank you for making me feel less alone." Then another message came from a woman in Sarah's book club. Then another from one of Leo's colleagues. They weren't just donating. They were sharing their own stories, their own silent struggles.
We had tapped into a deep, hidden well of shared experience. The money started to trickle in from small donors, $10, $25, $50, each donation feeling like a vote of confidence, a collective whisper of, "Me too." And then we received our first grant application. Her name was Maria. She was a young mother of two, trying to leave a situation that was no longer safe. Her barrier was a security deposit and the first month's rent for a small apartment. Her dream of a stable future was simply a door she could lock, a place where her children could feel secure. Reading her application, I didn't just see a stranger. I saw the ghost of my younger self. I saw the fear, and I saw the fierce, determined love for her children. Our small board, Leo, Sarah, Brenda the lawyer, and I, unanimously approved the grant. We transferred the funds to her landlord directly. A few weeks later, a photo arrived in the Evelyn Funds email inbox. It was a slightly blurry picture taken on a phone of Maria and her two little boys sitting on the floor of an empty living room, surrounded by a few garbage bags of their belongings. They were eating pizza, and all three of them were smiling, the kind of radiant, unburdened smiles that only come from knowing the worst is behind you. Taped to the bare wall behind them was a single, hand-drawn picture one of the boys had made. It was a house with a bright yellow sun overhead, and in wobbly crayon letters, it said, "Thank you." I printed that picture out. I put it in a simple frame and set it on my kitchen table, right where the debit card had once lain. Now, when I sit there with my morning coffee, I don't see a monument to my fear. I see a monument to our hope. The money is almost gone now, transferred out into the world to do its work, to build other foundations. But the fund, the mission, it's just getting started. And I finally understand what my mother meant all those years ago. It was never really about the money at all. It was always about the foundation, the one I built for my son and the one we are now building together for so many others.